This is Inside the Leader's Mind, where what's in the way becomes the way. I'm your host, David Susan. I am so excited to have my guest today, Ken Goodrich. He's a nationally recognized entrepreneur and the chairman of Goettle Air Conditioning and Plumbing, a leading home services company operating across the Southwest. With over 30 years' experience, he's built, acquired, and scaled dozens of HVAC and plumbing businesses, including Goettle, Yes Air Conditioning and Plumbing, and American Residential Services, each achieving hundreds of millions in annual revenue. Ken began his journey in the trades at the age of 10, helping his father on service calls, a hands-on experience that shaped his values of craftsmanship, integrity, and leadership. In 2025, he launched Kenerator. Can you guess who it's named after? A new venture revolutionizing the home standby generator market. Ken is also a champion for workforce development, having endowed programs at the College of Southern Nevada and serving on the Nevada Workforce Development Board, appointed by Governor Lombardo. He's a frequent industry speaker and mentor, and Ken is known for his motto, "We do things the right way, not the easy way." Ken, welcome to the show.
Hello, David. Glad to be here.
It is so good to have you with me. I got to start by, the child labor laws, your dad making you work when you're 10 years old. So we're going to wind back the clock a little bit because I think it is a fascinating part of the story. And I would love to just tell me a little bit about that and what led you to the career you're in now.
Yeah. Sometimes I jokingly say I was enslaved in the family business, but those of us who've had to operate in a family business when they were kids probably relate, right?
That was me. Yep.
Okay. And so, at the end of the day, it was a very valuable lessons. It was very difficult lessons to learn, right? But let me tell you this. I was in my last venture I built, Goettle Air Conditioning and Plumbing. Um, we created a brand story. And so I just got an award recently, and I said, they said, well, come up and tell a little bit about yourself. I said, I'm going to tell a little bit about myself with my favorite radio commercial. And everybody kind of looked at me. And I said, it goes like this. I was a 10-year-old boy holding the flashlight for my dad while he worked on an air conditioner for a customer. His name was Duncan Goodrich. He didn't talk much, but there's a certain kind of magic that happens when the son holds a flashlight for his father. I held it steady and quiet, and Dad talked to me while he worked. He said, when a person needs help, you go right away, not when it's convenient for you. He said, always do the right thing. Always do what's right. And he said, the Goettle Iron Horse is a magnificent machine. Nothing else even comes close. That was the first night I held the flashlight for my dad, but it wouldn't be the last. At Dad's funeral, I realized that every time he handed me that flashlight, he was passing the torch. And my dad believed in Goettle air conditioners. So I bought the company. Goettle, Goettl. Will keep you cool, but it's hard to spell. Now we'll respond right away and do the right thing always. No one knows air conditioning like Goettle, Goettl. Now that was our foundation radio ad.
Amazing. Yeah.
And a 100% authentic story. What I didn't tell you in the story was when I was 10 years old, my dad came home one night. He was a engineer. He was a electrical engineer. He came home one night, but he always would moonlight fixing things, right? He would fix people's televisions, radios, air conditioners, generators. And so that night we had to go fix a neighbor's air conditioner. And so he said, hey, I need you to hold the flashlight for me. Come on, get in the truck. So I go out there and I was so excited to hold the flashlight for my dad. And the first air conditioner I ever lit up with a flashlight at 10 years old was a Goettle air conditioner, the company that I bought and grew and sold.
Jeez.
And so 10 years old, I said, Dad, what is that? What's that word? Goettl. And he said, you're going to have to figure that on your own. And I'd say a couple versions. He said, nope, that's not it. That's not it. So, I went on my hunt to find out the name of how to pronounce that word over the years. But my dad really liked the Goettl machine. Goettl used to be a manufacturer of air conditioning. As a matter of fact, they invented the residential air conditioner, in the early 40s. They have 140 some patents, or 114 patents, that is, for air conditioning, air cooling technology. They were really leaders in the residential space, and they came out of Phoenix, Arizona, which they're attributed with being the catalyst of the growth and creation of Phoenix, Arizona, because they're the ones who made it habitable. So, 40 years later, 45 years later, the company had changed hand a few times, and it followed on hard times. I had a chance to buy it, so I bought the company because I felt like it was my duty. I had, grown up in the air conditioning business. My dad, he was a Goettl dealer. We used to sell, install, and service Goettls in Las Vegas. Goettle was just part of my heritage, and my dad really believed in the company. So I felt like it was my duty to buy that one and fix it. But what I've done for most of my career, my dad taught me how to fix air conditioners, right? He taught me how to repair and sell and talk to customers and such. Not so much about business, but, unfortunately, he passed away when I was 25, unexpectedly. And so I bought the family business from my mom, which was me and an old van and some tools. That was the business. And, we had a few customers, 115 customers actually. And I went out and I started learning how to run the business. And I got all kinds of stories and struggling stories. And I know most of you who are listening to this podcast that are, small business people or struggling business people, or the struggle, what it really takes from the moment you decide to create a business to the time that it really is an organized and well cash flowing machine. That's a whole different journey, right?
So, how do you go from a van and a one-person show? What is that? What did some of that progression look like to running a multi-million dollar business, right?
Well, I've had an interesting journey. I'll tell you. I was thinking on the way to the office this morning. This is my 54th year in HVAC. 54th year, because I started so young. But I I bought the business. I started in business. It was just a couple trucks, and me and a guy, and very small, and I had higher aspirations. My father ran a very controlled business. He didn't want to have a bunch of employees. He did most of the work himself, or I did, and we kept it tight like that. But I want to have employees and grow, and be an entrepreneur, be a big business guy, and sit in my big office and feet up on the desk and all the stuff you think a business really is, right? When you're first starting out. So I get into it and I start struggling. Like, I didn't know how to run a business. I knew how to sell things. I knew how to, hire people. Well, I didn't know how to hire people, but I hired a bunch of people, probably all the wrong way, and we went to work. One day, maybe 2 years in, I go to the office, and the guy's standing out front in a suit, and I introduce myself, and he says, "I'm from the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS, and I'm here to talk about your back payroll taxes."
No.
And I said, this is how green I was in business. I said, "What's payroll taxes?" And he quickly showed me what payroll taxes were
I'll bet.
by garnishing all my bank accounts on a
Oh
Friday.
no.
So we bounced payroll to all the employees and bounced all the checks that I made to my vendor and my personal stuff, and really tied me up. Took a few trucks that were in the parking lot. It was a bad day.
Because at this point you had grown to be how many employees probably
I had
at
30. So
at
so
that
it took me, I got the business. I started going out and I started hustling. I started getting contracts and hiring people and, taking everything I could get and put a sales team together. And I was doing that kind of stuff, but really without any business foundation or not even really understanding the mathematics behind the business yet. And so I didn't even know about payroll taxes.
Oh my gosh.
So we went out and out of 30 guys, uh, 28 quit. 30
Oh,
employees, 28 quit that day. And so, the business had pretty much blown up. And I had two people that stayed. One was Vince, and he was a little older than me. He was a Vietnam vet, and he said he had to take some medicine because of a condition that he got fighting in Vietnam called shell shocked,
mhm.
and he had to shoot something up every day.
Oh my gosh.
So turns out over time we found out that was heroin.
Oh,
He was really good when he wasn't doing that, but that's what I had. And then I had another technician who actually was a very good technician, but he was a little person tech because you know, I was a young guy and I thought it was good to have a little person on the team. So it was really, these two people that probably couldn't get a job anywhere else were the only ones who stuck with me. And I had the IRS saying, now we want weekly payments until you get caught up, or this is going to happen and this is going to happen. And, I was in some really tough times. So every
was
day, let me just say this. Every day I'd go out, sell a job. I had $3,000 cash that wasn't in the bank. It didn't get taken by the IRS. Nobody would take my checks, the vendors. So I would just go and buy the materials I needed for the job. And Vincent, the little guy, would go put them in. And then I'd go back, collect. Next day, go sell another one. And we just do that routine. And it took me about 19 months, I think, to dig out of a pretty, couple $100,000 hole back in the 80s. But I did it and I got it out. And in the meantime, I found this book called The E-Myth by Michael E. Gerber. The E-Myth Revisited, actually. So by Michael E. Gerber. And the caption says, Why Most Small Businesses Don't Work and What to Do About It. And I thought, well, this sounds like a logical place for me to
That's
start,
right.
right? And I was
Number
reading
one, make your payroll payment, your
yeah.
tax payment. There you go.
And so I started reading the book and I'm like, this guy had to be following me around because he literally knew every stupid thing I was doing, right? But it really opened my eyes on, what is a business? And I found out from reading it, a business is not the work. It's not the work or the service that you provide to the customer. That's one piece of it. But, what the book teaches you is there's 7 components of a business, as he outlined, that management needs to be on top of: leadership, management, money, marketing, lead generation, lead conversion, and client fulfillment. Those are the 7 things, and that resonated with me. And the concept of building a business prototype and the concept of documenting processes and training processes and innovating, documenting and quantifying the results with metrics, all these fundamental business tools that you don't really learn in an AC service truck. And so I got the book and I just committed myself to it. It was in my back pocket for 3 straight years.
Oh
Every
my
time I
gosh.
was got discouraged or didn't know where to go, I'd pull it out and I'd read it. But because this was before the internet, I had no access to any information.
Yeah.
And so we got it out, we pulled it out, and through that process, I had built myself a business prototype system for the HVAC world that worked very well.
Before you go on, I want to interject here a couple quick things. First of all, you go from 30 employees to 2.
One and
Why
a half.
one God, that's awful. 2. Did it ever occur to you to quit? File bankruptcy and just go get a job doing something else? Did you ever second guess yourself and go, okay, maybe this is not for me?
Well, I was kind of in a pickle with that situation. Did I think about it? Sure, absolutely. It's not my nature. I mean, I was raised by a very, I was raised by a depression era dad who have a really strong work ethic and, not a lot of complaining and, just very, very structured upbringing, right? And so that really wasn't my nature, but certainly I'm thinking looking at the options because it was looking pretty dire. You got the IRS chasing me around, threatening me every week, and pretty much got a gun to my head all the time. So, figuratively, but
Right.
so and then I had two things against me to quit. One, you can't discharge payroll taxes in bankruptcy. Okay, you can't do it. So that would follow me anyway if I filed bankruptcy, for instance. And the other side was the business I bought was my family business. So I was paying my mom payments. And I'm like, I couldn't go over to my mom and say, oh, now, mom, I burnt down the family business that supported us for 25 years. So I'm not paying you. I couldn't do that either. So I had to gut my way out. But, one of the pivotal things that happened in my story is I was, I was really stressed and I was very stressed out. It was a very troubling time, you know, once the IRS had came in and taken some things. So I went out and I drove out to see some friends that I grew up with, in San Diego. And so we're driving around San Diego. I'm following them in my car. We're going to go to dinner one night. And I'm thinking about all the situations that are going on with my business and such. And I don't know, something just came over me. And I said, in my mind, you might have to bleep this out. In my mind, I said, quit being such a fucking pussy and get back there and make that business work. Okay. I just said it out loud. I don't know if my dad came and sent me a message or what, but I just said it out loud and I saw an exit right then to go head towards back Vegas and I took it. And I left my buddies and I just started coming back to Vegas. Um, so that was kind of a turning point for me. I just made the decision right there. I'm not going to fail. I'm not going to stop. I'm going to make this business work. I know I can do it. I'm going to find whatever resources and devote as much time and discipline I need to get it done. And that's what I did.
So, how did the E-Myth and process standard operating procedure play into from that point forward?
We just became, we understood that I just made the rule. If we can't document it, train it, and quantify it, we don't do it. So unless we have something documented how we're going to do it, people are trained doing it, and we can quantify the results and we can make sure that it's working, then take it out of our business. We won't do that thing. We'll only do the things that we can manage, with the system. And so, as I started rallying my team, as started growing back again, everybody became very good at, okay, we need to do this thing. Let's make a checklist. And we just got a company culture of creating our own SOPs and documenting things and routine training and things like that.
Now, was that part of your natural nature as a kid? Like when you look at least through high school or till 25 when your dad passed, were you kind of this process oriented, organized, or were you a little more scatterbrained, ADD? Did you have to wrangle that? Like, how hard was it for you to do process, to do what you were doing? Because some
Well,
people struggle with that.
I'll say I'm much better at telling people to do it than I am at personally doing it. I'll say that it's not my nature.
Okay.
But I will say this: the reason why it resonated with me, why I got it, and I knew that it had to be that way, because I knew how an air conditioner worked, for instance. I knew the process of everything that has to happen to produce cold or warm air coming out of this machine. And, there's various systems that have to operate inside it. And that made the connection for me. So it was easy for me to understand on what pieces and parts we need to make it work. I was doing the whole concept of the customer journey is relatively new, but I was doing customer journey back in the 80s. I didn't know it was called that, but I had a big whiteboard and drew a van and a phone, and here's the phone rings, and then what's happening? We have to lay out the whole
The
customer.
system process. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as you grew over time, companies can grow organically or they can grow through acquisition. How did you grow to the point where you were able to afford to buy Goettl?
So So I get to the point, I pay off the IRS. I understand the system, I understand the prototype business system, and we're building our prototype business system. And then we start to really start to pull ahead of the competition. I had restored my reputation with the vendors. They wanted to deal with me now. I had restored my reputation with the labor forces. So, people would feel comfortable working for me now because I knew I wouldn't bounce their checks. And, so I had a pretty good routine going. But what I started doing was, and so we started to organically grow and take market share because we just had a system. We just were doing it better and more efficient. Well, then I came across. I ca- I'll tell you this part of the story by telling you a story. So when all this is going on, one of my competitors passes away. Right, this is 1989, I think. One of my competitors passes away, and I'm driving my truck, and I'm thinking, wonder how I could get that guy's phone number. So when people call his business, we'll get the calls, right? So I'm thinking about how do I get the phone number. So I pull into the phone company. I go talk to somebody in the administration, and they said, "Well, we can't give a phone number out for 1 year after it's a business phone number for 1 year after it's been shut off. The FTC says we got to give a business owner a year to catch up." Okay, and I said, "Well, I assure you, this guy will not be in to catch up the bill, right? Because he's passed away, right?" And they said, "Well, if you can show that he's passed away, we'll give you the number." I'm like, "Okay." Now I'm like 26. I'm like, how do I show someone passed away? So I'm asking around. Some guy says, "Hey, go to the health department and you can get a death certificate. Costs $7." I said, "Okay." So I go down there, I get the death certificate, bring it down to the phone company. They seemed a little agitated that I'd taken it that far, but they said, "Okay, well, we'll do it." They key in their computer and said, "All right, it's going to your phone number now."
Wow.
So I drive right back to the office, and my receptionist had stepped out or something. So the phone was ringing, she wasn't there. So I pick up the phone, and the lady said, is this day and night air conditioning?" And I said, "Oh no, Ray unfortunately has passed away, and we're taking over helping his customers out." She said, "Oh no," she said, "because he gave me this bid for $7,000 job. Is it still good?" I said, "Well, of course it is. Of course it is."
No, we don't want your business.
And I didn't even know what it was. I just said, "Of course it is." I said, "When can I come over and take a look and get it planned?" And so we scheduled something. And I went out, and luckily it was a profitable job. But from a $7 investment, I got a $7,000 job. And I'm thinking, this is a pretty
That's a good
darn
deal.
way to grow, right? This
That's a
is an
good deal.
interesting way to grow. So
Yeah.
that was kind of my first acquisition, if you will. And then I started finding, once I got that phone number, guys started to come to me. AC guys, older guys, they're getting ready to retire. "Hey, do you want to buy mine too?" And blah, blah, blah. And so I started buying these usually retirees or guys who were struggling, not doing well, um, uh, guys going bankrupt. We would go. My lawyer taught me how to petition the courts to be a white knight to literally take a bankrupt company and fix it and grow it. But remember, I had this background. I had this background of coming through the fire of learning how to turn a business around and learning how to build a business prototype. These businesses were very easy for me because I had a system. So I would walk in and I would supercharge all of these little broken businesses or retiree businesses. Um, I would always 10x minimum their revenue. If they were doing 300,000, I'd do 3 million with the same business the same year because we had a system.
How many, if you had to guess, in your whole career, how many businesses do you think you acquired, merged with, whatever terminology, if you had to guess?
I mean, I've done everything from that one phone number, and I've had hundreds of phone numbers. Okay, buying hundreds of databases of failed companies. I don't know, maybe. And then I've had some really big acquisition going concerns. I've kind of done it
It-
all, but you know, maybe three, depending on how you want to count phone numbers and databases I purchased, 300 to 400.
That's crazy. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
And so
And
then what I did
the
was,
biggest one
yeah, yeah.
being Goettl.
The biggest one was Goettl, yeah. Now, so I got the business system. I learned how to acquire companies. I learned how to I certainly knew how to drive organic growth and learn, and I was always had kind of a good idea on branding, marketing, and sales. Like that was always kind of second nature to me, or I was stronger in that. So I was try to drive the business, and then every year I'm picking off these phone numbers, databases, retiring guy, adding to the base, right? Well, I did that just for a couple years, and then I attracted a national firm that was doing a rolling up the industry called American Residential Services, ARS. And they were doing a nationwide roll up, so they came to me and said, "We would like you to be part of our group and be one of our founding members, and let's build this company together." So this was my whole business plan, though. At this time was I was gonna I bought the business, I was gonna grow it, I was gonna organize it, and I was gonna sell it, and then I was gonna go try to do something new with my life because I'd been in air conditioning since I was 10, right? So I did the deal. So I finished my plan. I had a uh, I had documented a plan that said I'm going to build it to this with a management team, recurring revenue, all this stuff, and I'm going to sell it, and then I'm going to go off and you know go get a nice suit and some loafers and be a big business guy or something. I don't know.
There you go.
So that's where I started going, and so I sold the business there. But then when I got to that business, these are the guys who created waste management, for instance. They were big, sophisticated, entrepreneurial corporate business guys, right? So I had an opportunity that most people in my industry don't get, which is I got to work alongside of these guys with what I knew. And they respected me for what I knew. I respected them for what they knew. But this is where I learned M&A, mergers and acquisitions on a more higher caliber level. This is where I learned multi-branch management. This is where I learned a lot about leadership. This is where I learned a lot about deeper metrics and data, use of data, and all this stuff that you would not ever learn with running a mom and pop HVAC business, a local company, right? And so I was going through that process, and then I was visiting other shops around the country, whether I was doing an acquisition for them or I was doing some of my leadership roles. But I get to see things that other operators did to their businesses or what they were doing right now, and I'm like, oh, I should have done that. oh, I'm going to do that now. It got me
You
re-inspired in the
learned.
industry because
Yeah.
I could see things that I could just now see a whole another level of potential. And so I lived out my obligation with my non-compete and such with that deal. And I said, I'm going to go do it again. So long story short, Goettl was my sixth one over my career that I've built. So
Crazy.
I've built regional companies, you know, putting these smaller businesses together to build one brand, come with a cohesive brand. Then I would go open up in, adjacent cities in other states, Arizona, Utah, you know, I'm from Las Vegas, and we'd go into Reno, things like that, and we would start to build these regional businesses all branded. And I caught the attention of a lot of these consolidators. I caught the attention of private equity, and so they would always come to me and want to buy them. And so I became from you know, this pressure cooker, this fire that I was in, with the IRS story and Vince and the little guy,
Crazy. Yeah.
all the way through to becoming educated and a skilled business turnaround expert and an expert leading HVAC companies. And I started this process, became a business builder. I do a lot of speaking, and I tell everybody, you know, all the business people, that you're not an HVAC contractor. You're a business builder, and you need to clearly understand and get the right mindset that you need to understand what is the elements of building a business. What are the elements to build a business prototype system so that you can grow it, scale it, have it ran by a management team, and you be exactly what you should be, the owner or major stockholder, not an employee or a slave to that business. So anyway, I've done 6 of them. Now we're on number 7, which I just decided to focus on Hurricane Alley and roll up the standby generator industry for residential. And so we've been at that for 2 years. We've done really well. We have 4 locations already. Got a great team
Just
coming.
doing it again.
Yeah. And I'm using my same formula. We're buying some some we bought smaller, some struggling, some underperforming businesses. And we bought 14 million in revenue early 24, so on the 4 shops. And this year we'll close out 40 million in revenue with the same shop. So you're talking about organic growth. We've grown them that much in 1 year.
Significant. Yeah. 3x almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By putting our fundamental system in.
So I want to interject and ask a question here is, we have listening to the podcast, we could have executives, leaders at any size organization. So let's break it into the 2 different realms. What have you learned at this point about what leadership or running a business that would apply at a large corporation? And what have you learned that a small business owner could walk away with?
Well, I think it's the same thing. Great leaders are great actors, meaning, you can't let your people see you sweat. You can't let your people see you doubt yourself. You have to be strong in your convictions, and you have to be the brand evangelist, I call it. You have to know the story and the vision. You have to be able to inspire people, continually talking about the vision and what they're building. Every single business, we're looking for what we call the tipping point. And the tipping point is when we see that we've now got the right team in place, we've got the right training in place, and everybody's bought into the vision, and you can tell everyone that comes to work happy because they know that they're part of something bigger than themselves. When you see that happen, that's when I know we got it. And so I buy all these businesses, and I'm looking for that moment. And when we hit the tipping point, I'm like, good, this one's gone. This one's off to the races.
Is it possible for someone who's not the CEO, not the president, not the owner to take on this mindset, being the evangelist? If let's say they're a VP or a director, or they're not, they're a manager.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, I think that really that's your goal is to start having some champions inside the business that are helping you parrot your vision, right? And that's really where you want to be. And there's various techniques. Obviously, one of the most powerful techniques is with them, what's in it for me, making sure that every business I've ever built, I've carved out a nice chunk of the profits, the exit profits for my key people. And so there's been key people that we have, they follow me around every single deal. These were, you know, worked admin in the office or AC technicians or, a middle manager, all of which now are all multimillionaires from our various deals and our successes.
That paying it forward like that is amazing. I want to ask you, what is something you believed early in your career that you now realize is completely wrong?
Well, lots of things. Let me see what I can come up with. I think that I think that what I what I what I believe what I used to believe before was that uh you have to go out and find the best and brightest, the highest skilled people possible. And that's what I always endeavored to do. And I've always been a good eye for talent. But as I grow and I have these different experiences, what I've learned is, yeah, you always want to try to get the best and brightest on the team. However, you know, there's a lot more to it. It's not more to the culture. And you start getting all A players on the team, really hard driving A players. Sometimes that goes bad. Sometimes they start bickering and fighting and not working together as great as a team. So I guess what I'm saying is that what I thought I was like, you stack the deck with all Michael Jordans. That doesn't always work. You got to have a more uh, for lack of a better term, diversity level and experiences and backgrounds to really support the culture to take it to the next level. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. At so it sounds like, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. Yes, you're fixing a company, but if you're not just hiring the Michael Jordans of the world, you're really developing people. At what point did you realize that where that changed where you're like, wait a minute, I'm I'm making these people, helping make these people really more effective, more successful. And it wasn't just hire this great talent.
Yeah, well, I think I had read something that Michael Gerber had read, and this is written. This is long after my story about the book and the IRS and
Yeah.
all that stuff. So, but after that, he said it's about creating a system that makes ordinary people do extraordinary things. Okay. And once I got that, I had examples. Like we had some spots in the business where, you know, some ordinary folks or people who had never really worked that much or never been in a specific role we had them in really perform well, but they did because they had a system to follow. And what they did right is they embraced the system. And once I figured out that average normal people embracing a system makes them extraordinary, then we started leaning in and looking at the business a lot different. And it's hard to operate with all A players, Michael Jordans at the same room, right? and it's expensive too. So really, at the end of the day, and this is the Michael Gerber moniker, the system is the solution in all things.
I always say, when I do my keynotes, I always talk about building the perfect team, all Michael Jordans. And I always tell people, the leaders that I'm working, coaching with, I said, you can't do it. Everyone thinks you can. You cannot build the perfect team. You can't hire them. You can't afford them, but you can build the systems and you can be a better leader to get the most out of those people. So, kind of with that thought, was there a moment that changed how you saw yourself as a leader? Not just system and process, but really just a leader of people.
I think it all changed. Like I've done some really interesting projects in the industry. Uh, you know, taken on, an example is I had a business with 3 locations and I sold it to a national firm, and they said, "Hey, if you go fix these 7 businesses we have over here, we'll give you a big bonus, like you owned them, like we bought them from you, a similar kind of take, right?" So I did that project, and like that project, for instance, I was a taskmaster. You know, that's how I got that done. I got it done, but I was a taskmaster. I wasn't a leader. And then when we evolved to the Goettl brand, and the Goettl brand meant so much to me, it was emotional. Like it was it was my duty. I looked at it as it was my duty, and then and it was also going to be my opus in the HVAC trade. And for some, as the story unfolds, and I can get in more detailed if you wanted to, but I get to this place where I understand that the problem of the company was why it was ready to go bankrupt because they had a big reputation problem. The leadership was was the problem. And so we created the brand story. But once I saw the power of that brand story that I told you earlier, the Goettle story, that really involved me as a more of a visionary leader to where I could truly motivate the team and and you know inspire them with things other than numbers and money and results, right?
And what would that be? What would you say that people leadership superpower is? Obviously, process and all that, but as far as people, getting people to rally, getting them excited, other than just giving them money, what was it?
You have to be able to convince them that the work they're doing here is meaningful and it's enriching to other people and it makes them better to do this work and where we're heading and to build this brand. We had established that brand with that brand story, which is a very heartfelt, emotional story, and we had, most of that was done on the radio at the time, and so this we progressed this long story over years, telling about Goettle and me and the situations and what goes on in the air conditioning business, what goes on in people's lives, but we just communicated in such a manner that we were touching a heart, and so that um, made people feel like they were doing meaningful work. And especially because we had created a brand that, that, that what's that, that there are technicians, the people in the home could proudly wear because they would get positive feedback from the community. Our commercials were so good, our brand story was so good and was so compelling that, um, that people would stop them in restaurants. I love your radio commercials. Oh, I love you guys. I can't wait till my air conditioner breaks because you're the only guys I'm going to call because of this brand story we created, right? So it kind of goes back to what I said earlier. Like you have to be able to be the brand evangelist. You have to be able to tell the story and motivate your team and provide a place where they can become bigger than themselves.
Uh, is that possible In your mind, is that possible in almost any kind of business? Picking up trash, selling widgets? Because some people listening to this will go, "Oh, well, that's different." Everyone says that. Oh, but it's different. It's different. What's your take?
Yeah, I think it has to be, right? You have to have an origin story and a vision for the company. You have to be able to say it no matter what you're doing or whatever, organization you're involved in. Um, we've had examples where I've gone into and using this technique, gone into uh, business groups, you know. In this particular case, when it mentions a HVAC business group in business owners group in Las Vegas, and it was struggling, and it was, time for a change, and all this stuff went on. But so I went up through the ranks and the on the board roles, and then I became the chairman, and I started painting the vision for the team, and I did everything that I'm describing here, and I started talking about the heritage of the organization, what it meant to people, and what we do for our our brethren in HVAC and all this kind of stuff. And over time, I rallied the support. I got the whole thing turned around, and we grew it from, I don't know, 15 members to maybe 150 members, and had a robust organization from that. But I think it can work with anybody, and I think everybody, you have to have an origin story. I got to tell you, in the beginning, when I'm struggling, I realized that I couldn't let them see us sweat, right? I couldn't let them
Mm.
see me sweat. So, I mean, I would get in front of my team and I'd be telling them, this is who we are. We're the best of the best. We are the best HVAC technicians. We are best at customer service. We take care of ourselves. We take care of each other. I go through all these things and get everybody motivated. And I knew damn well I didn't have their payroll tomorrow. So you have to come up and be able to present yourself and keep people inspired. Now, ultimately, I got the payroll, but at that moment, I'm thinking, man, I got to keep these guys head in the right direction and understand my values and what we're building here and what it means to them.
Did you believe? Did you truly believe you were the best? Because a lot of leaders, a lot of people I work with, they don't believe that they're the best. They don't believe their team is the best. They don't believe the business is the best.
Well,
What?
I believed that we were going to make it the best. I believed that we did the best work because I demanded that we do the best work, that my processes were documented, that we were the most thorough and did the best work. And the reason why I did that was, well, that's how I was taught from my dad.
Right.
But I also knew that, I knew that I got to the place where I really understood the economics of the business. And the economics go like this: if you're not a premium provider and able to charge the right price in your business, you're not going to make any money. You're going to fail. And so we had to provide the level of service that would allow us to charge the proper price for us to make a profit and grow. And I figured out what that formula was. And we built a business that we were always the fastest growing in every market we served. We always went to either number one or number two, wherever market we went, and we were the most expensive.
Remarkable.
Yeah.
You made a comment about being the best. How do you, for other leaders, how do you create that desire to be the best? Because not everyone wants to be the Michael Jordan. And I know it might sound crazy to you that someone would say, well, why wouldn't they want to be the best? How do you create that desire in someone, or how does that make sense? How do you go about creating that desire that drives that growth? Starting
Well,
with
I
the
think it
desire
starts with,
first.
you got to make sure you have people that resonates with, right? Sometimes some people don't even think about that. But let me tell you another story that happened to me. That's a nice leadership story, and how it got me thinking, to answer your question, okay? Because I like this story. So I was at I was with Michael Gerber. I mean, after he had helped me with with his book, I never met him for 25 years. Until 25 years after that, I met him, and then he I told him my story. He said, "Well, why don't you write the E-Myth HVAC contractor book with me?" And I said, "Well, I'd
Cool.
be honored to, because to me, he was my mentor. He was the
Right.
guy who brought me all the knowledge that I needed to do everything I was doing." So I did that. I wrote the E-Myth HVAC contractor with him. Now just finishing the E-Myth plumber and the E-Myth electrician with him. But so I got to know him, and I was at a convention with him, a roofing convention, and there was a panel, and Richard Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Poor
Mm.
Dad guy,
Rich Dad Poor Dad. Yeah.
he was speaking, and he was talking, and he said the word culture. Now I'm like, that culture word caught me, because I never really I did some good culture stuff, but I didn't understand what culture was. When you say the word culture to me in the past, I would think touchy-feely, foosball tables and uh, leather couches in the warehouse. This is what I saw culture people talk about, which most of the culture people, I never, certainly in my industry, most of them never really had a really good business. And so they were confusing culture. I didn't really understand it so much. I knew what I did, but here's Richard Kiyosaki talking about culture. So I said, "Hey, can you tell me in your words, what is culture?" And he says, "Well, I'm going to tell you a story." So he said, "When I got out of high school, I didn't have enough money to go to college. I wanted to go to college. So I had to go into the military and get the GI Bill so they could pay for my college. So I was going to the recruiters, and I was trying the different military groups. And so I went to the Coast Guard. That wasn't for me. I went to the Air Force. That seemed boring. And then a buddy of mine said, I'm going to, let's go to the Marines. So we go to the Marines, and, all of a sudden this big guy walks up in his dress blues, does the perfect march, and just mesmerizing guy. And he turns around and he says, "Gentlemen, before we get started, let me make one thing perfectly clear. We are the Marines, and here we kill people." And that Richard Kiyosaki, he said, "That's when I knew that was the place for me," which, he got a nice laugh out of it, but he wanted to be in the Marines, right? And he said, "What I learned from the Marines was culture is a business system." Okay. Culture is a document that says, this is how we conduct ourselves here. This is how we treat each other's stuff around here. This is how we care about each other here. This is how we care about our customers. This is how we care about our vendors. This is how we operate here. And he said in the Marines, the fundamental culture rule was leave no man behind. And that was the fundamental of everything we did. We protect each other. So that resonated with me when he said, coming from my background, when he said, culture is a business system. So then I started thinking about it and kind of organizing my culture system for each business we were doing. And I always endeavored to be authentic. I would imagine that you could create a culture system that maybe doesn't meet your personal values, but I couldn't do that. But I imagine you could. But it had to meet my personal values, and that's kind of where we got to the whole thing that you mentioned earlier. We do things the right way, not the easy way, because that's just a statement that my dad used to say to me as a kid growing up, and that's how we did things. And I never really used it much after he had passed away. But when we got Goettle, it all just kind of came together. We took the Goettle story about them inventing the air conditioner, and you know all the all the great work they've done for the world. And then we melded it with my story of I was a 10-year-old boy holding the flashlight for my dad while he worked on an air conditioner. And it was like a perfect duet, you know, and it just seemed to resonate with everybody. But it's like I bought this company with this huge background. I'm thinking the companies, most people would not have bought it because it was in pretty bad shape. But I'm thinking, they invented the air conditioner. How could I screw that up? Right? I can fix this one.
And you did.
Yeah.
You did. What so when you talk about process, standard operating procedure, you it sounds like you not only did it with the business, how you run the business, but how you work with standard operating procedure of people, culture, right? It's like it was both aspects.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. What what advice would you give? Well, let me rephrase this. If you look at other leaders, what is something that in your opinion, they can't learn from a book? Meaning you got to learn it the hard way. You can't just go read a book and go, "Oh, okay, here, this is the like." What is there something that your experience has taught you that people are just preparing them? You're just gonna have to do this. You're just gonna do it over and over and over to fail to learn. Is there anything like that,
Um,
or do you think you can learn everything and then wave your magic wand and you're fine?
no, no. I mean, I sell these businesses, and sometimes the new owner does well with them, and sometimes they don't. And that just goes to show you that, a lot of these times, these big scale companies, they hire educated people, but they're not necessarily hiring, uh, they're not necessarily hiring specifically or subject matter experts. They're general business, college trained people, but they don't know. I liken it to this. I forgot the name of the movie, but it's a Clint Eastwood movie, and he was he was like a gunny. He was like a Marine, that gunny level,
Yep, yep.
and he had he had the platoon he was supposed to train or something, and they were revolting, and how he put them into shape, and they had to go to some sort of battle, and the lieutenant was trying to make these orders, do this, and the guy's like, that's not going to work. We can't do that. Like he knew the true ways around how to tweak the battle to win, and the lieutenant was just giving his general knowledge they learned at school, right? I don't know where I was going with that, but I guess in this particular case, in this business, I know, well, I guess, to answer your question, I guess it goes like this. You have to know the business of the business. You cannot come in with a general business idea and, and take it and make it work. You need to really get an understanding the essence and how the customers, what is the customer buy process, right? What motivates the people, motivates your team, these type of people. Because I got to tell you, every single trade, the labor force is different. The
Yeah.
mentalities and what motivates them, you got to understand all those little nitty gritty details. You can't just be a generalist and make it really work the way I have.
So, along the same lines, what mistakes do you see leaders make over and over and over again?
Um, I think, I think a lot of leaders are coming in, like I said, especially with all the scaled up private equity acquisitions are coming in from the general business knowledge, but they all they focus on is the data, the numbers. And while that's valuable, that's an important thing, you really need to understand everything we've been talking about today, the people. We are in a people business, and you need to understand the people and how to relate to the people and how to inspire, motivate those people. Um, so I think most guys come at it from a data driven and a um, Chinese wall kind of leadership, where they're friendly, not familiar, and not really connecting with the team and being somewhat plastic or unauthentic. I think that's really limits them. And I've seen a lot of guys who just can't seem to get out of that, just that get out of that hole they put themselves into.
As we come to the end, of just a couple more questions. And one is, what would you want people to remember about your approach long after you're gone?
Well, I think never give up. Never give up. There's always an answer. There's always a way. You just have to keep showing up every single day. It's amazing to me how many broken businesses that I've turned around, and I bought the business and it was struggling and it was bleeding cash, and even it go on a little longer than I expected. I'm like, is this thing ever going to end? Am I going to get this really fixed? And how just a couple key things, just the right marketing message. The one right person you bring on the team that somehow brings it all together to make it work. Some special deal some special contract you got that turns it over, and boom, you all of a sudden the business starts to work.
And if you were giving one piece of advice to the version of you when you were starting out, what would that be? Hindsight's always 2020, right?
Yeah. Well, I give this advice all the time to guys who are trying to start out like I did. I get guys emailing me or texting me or social mediaing me from all over the world actually now that are in the trades, and they say, "Hey Ken, hey Ken, I just gave my notice to my boss, my 2 week notice, and I bought my van and get all my tools in there. I'm starting in 2 weeks. Any words of advice for me or words of wisdom?" And I say, "Yes. Go back to your boss, beg for your job back,
Yep.
go find a best practice group, and learn the business of the business before you start." Go out there. There's best practice groups for most every industry. Certainly, you can get a fundamental of things like the number one thing, like I said earlier, where I find people go wrong in business, they just don't know the math behind the business. They don't know how to charge. And, everyone ignores the math of the business because they think that they have to meet some sort of customer expectation on pricing or the market on pricing. But when you do that, you're usually basing your price, and I'm talking small business, not more sophisticated businesses, but you're basing your price on a market that's created by a bunch of other people who don't know how to price either. So, you really understand the mathematics of the business on what makes this work, what kind of margins do I need to create, what does my efficiency and productivity rates need to be, how do I contain my overhead so that I can put some profits to the bottom so it will help me grow and fuel my future.
Yeah.
So they got to learn the business of being in business before they start. So tell them all the time, and you know what? I'd say 50% do it, and those
Oh,
50% always succeed. The other 50%, they go in the free fall. And the
so-
free fall is starting a business that they don't know how to run a business. And what happens, like some people who've got too far out. So let's say a guy comes out to me and says, "Hey, Ken, I'm going to do $2 million this year. Uh, any words of wisdom to get me, to get to the next place?" I said, "What best practice group are you in?" And they said, "Well, I'm not in one." I said, "Okay, I want you to figure
get
out
in one.
how much revenue that you need to do to support your current standard of living, as long as it's not more than what you're making. And then I want you to pare the business down to that. So let's say for this conversation, you could do 1 million in revenue, and you could take enough and make, let's say for this conversation, you could take $100,000 a year to live on. Do that so the business itself is not distracting you from learning how to run the business, because I've seen that done 1 million times. So, they some of them go ahead and do that, and it works out, and sometimes they don't, and I might buy the business.
There you go. Your next acquisition. All right. Last question. What is the question you wish people would ask you, but they don't? They don't know to ask you, but you wish secretly that they would.
Um, was it worth it? Was it all worth it? I mean, I've done some pretty astonishing things in terms of in my industry, and certainly astonished myself anyway. But I became a business builder, and I built these companies. I built fantastic teams and great outcomes, and great stories on every single one of the ventures. Um, but I asked myself routinely, was it worth it? And I'll say, for the most part, it was. I think absolutely. I've had a great adventurous life. I've had a nice living, taking care of my family. I've taken care of a lot of families. I've been a great leader that allowed people to uh, create outside lives themselves that normally wouldn't had the opportunity. Helped build the industry, things like that. Sometimes I'll say though, you look back on it and say, man, what did I miss out on? Because owning a business and leading a company, you can get sucked in. You can get sucked in, and it becomes the only thing in your life that you think about. It consumes you, and then that's time away from your family and distraction from your family and things like that. Now, I would say I'm here to report that I did pretty good. Like my family's great, my children are great, my wife and I've been married for 35 years. All that's come together. But sometimes I think about, like, if I were to tell people starting out, you know, uh, how, how to approach it so that they don't get to the end of the road and go, well, that wasn't worth it. One thing I got to say though, I was so fortunate that I, that I had in my couple years of college, I had picked up some things or here in the classes I went to, and I understood this, that a business is the goal of a business leader is to enhance shareholder value. And I happen to be the shareholder too. And so I understood that building a business is about building something of value. And so at first I struggled, I didn't understand it. But then as soon as I kind of got the Gerber stuff and I started to understand that, I started building businesses and really looking at them as, what are they worth today? No different than if I was a real estate developer, I had a piece of land and I was improving the land to increase the value, right? Um, and so I attacked it from that front. And when I attacked the front one, the first one, I had a goal to sell for $1 million, $1 million in 1990 something, and because I thought that was a lot of money back then. And but we sold that one. We sold for six, our first business, and various things. And you know, over the course of time with the transactions we've done, we've created over $1 billion in value in HVAC companies, uh, in the exits.
Remarkable.
Yeah.
Absolutely remarkable. Well, you're a remarkable individual. If someone wants to learn more about Kenerator, your new business, or yourself, what is the best way for them to reach out to you?
Well, they can go to Kenerator.com. Now, let me tell you the quick Kenerator story. When I was a kid, my dad, like I said earlier, was MacGyver. He could fix anything, right? So I was always kind of having to carry the tools and do this stuff. And one of the things he did fix was generators. At that time were commercial, but and every time he would get them running, and I'd be there, and it was like, it's pretty. If you ever been around a big industrial generator when they start these 16-cylinder monster engines, um, it's fun. But these big things start up, and you hear the rumble in your chest. And every time that would happen, my dad would give me a high five and say, "You're the Kenerator." So when I got into the business, I thought, well, I'm going to build a brand around Kenerator generator and tell my story. So
Love
anyway,
it.
that's how I got to Kenerator. I have a website, kengoodrich.com, and certainly on LinkedIn and such.
All right. And I'll put links for all of this in the show notes.
Okay.
Okay. So, Ken, thank you so much for sharing your story and sharing your insights with our audience. You've been fantastic, and I'm was thrilled to have you with me today. So, thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm glad we could talk. Nice spending some time with you.
Absolutely, folks. That this is Inside the Leader's Mind. I'm David Susan. Thanks for being with us. Please subscribe, share, and thanks for being with us. We appreciate you listening. Take care. Bye, Ken.